Hey everybody, I'm Alan with Bricks and Blocks Gaming, and in this video for the game of Stargrave, I'll be playing the 5th scenario for my campaign going through the Last Prospector supplement, which will be the Devil's Fruit Bowl scenario. Stargrave is a sci-fi skirmishing wargame written by Joseph A. McCullough and published by Osprey Games, and the Last Prospector is the author's second full-length supplement for the game. I'll show you the state of my crews, explain the bricks and blocks of the Devil's Fruit Bowl scenario, then we'll start the battle. Captain Errooo is now level 22, carrying his rapid fire / flamethrower, a knife, and wearing heavy armor. And his first mate Sergeant Ruga is now level 3. He's wearing his combat armor and carrying picks, a swift suit, increasing his move by 1, and a medkit. The mercenary crew of the Iron Golem still consists of their burner, their bruiser, their striker, their pathfinder with a shotgun, their codebreaker with a shotgun and his force shield bracelet, their carbine-wielding trooper who's wearing jet boots, and their robots, the sentry with a shotgun and their chiseler. Captain Smada is still level 16. He's wearing his heavy armor and carrying his hand weapon, picks, a medkit, and is taking a flamethrower for this battle. His first mate Blinky is now level 6 and is carrying his flamethrower, knife, picks, and his micro-transporter to make bait and switch more difficult to resist, and is wearing heavy armor. The crime gang of the Negator still consists of 2 sentries and a pathfinder, all with shotguns, their robot striker, a bruiser, their medic, and their sniper and their engineer, both with carbines. But they also have a Shangri-La because of the Shangri-La cages they added to their ship after the last battle. The search for the Last Prospector has brought the crews to the Devil's Punch Bowl, a swampy basin on the jungle planet of Hanera, to gather some rare fruit in exchange for more information about the missing person's whereabouts. The fruit is becoming so rare because the Freeholders League has been illegally harvesting it to near extinction, and there happens to be 4 members of that faction who are currently here piling up bags of the fruit. So each of these figures are carrying unlocked physical loot, and to get it, a crew member has to come into contact with them and make a will roll plus their Freeholders faction standing against a target number of 10. If successful, the figure drops the loot and is moved 6 inches, ignoring terrain modifiers. Otherwise, the figures are in combat, and the Freeholders count as ruffians. On the first 2 turns, these figures will make a single random move action, halved while carrying loot, and after that will use their first action each turn to move toward the closest table edge, then fire their pistol with their second action. And since Smada's crew has a standing of 3 with the Freeholders, the first shot taken against one of their crew members automatically misses. Depending on how the players deal with these Freeholders will determine the faction bonuses after the game. And there is a standard physical loot in the center of the board that's unlocked using usual means. To represent the battlefield being a sloped basin, anytime a figure is stunned by a shooting attack, they'll roll 3 inches toward the middle of the board, ignoring terrain. But in my case, I've set up the bottom of the basin over here just based on how I could set up my base plates. The foliage across the whole battlefield is really dense, so any figure beyond 6 inches away is treated as having at least light cover against shooting attacks. And to further add to this, I added a house rule that the swampy area here with the water base plates limits line of sight to 3 inches, so no one can see all the way through it, and it counts as rough ground for movement. Each team paid 25 credits for a guide to get them here. They're sentries that don't count against the crew size, and each team is going to end up with 3 venomous croakers, which are plants, not frogs, that they can place on the board, 1 at the end of each turn, at least 3 inches from other figures. These have the ability to grab figures and pull them into combat, and their attacks are poisonous. There's also an option for random encounters, but I won't be using it because there's a lot going on already. For deployments, since both teams hired guides to get here, it doesn't say this in the rules, but I decided to clump their teams together like they're actually coming out of the jungle right there with their guide. So over here, for Erroo's team, their guide is here. I'm saying he's carrying a shotgun. We've got Errooo, Sergeant Ruga, their Chiseler, their Codebreaker, Pathfinder, Trooper, their Striker, Burner, Bruiser, and their Robot Sentry there. And for the team's out-of-game powers, Errooo succeeded on Toxic Secretion, so they'll make the Guide and the Trooper's attacks all poisonous. And he also succeeded on Restructure Body, so he will be immune to being wounded. But both he and Ruga once again failed on their Armoury rolls, so Ruga has to pay 50 for his combat armor. And over to Smada's team on the other side of the table. Their guide right up front here has also chosen to carry a shotgun. Here is Smada, First Mate Blinky, their Sniper, Medic, Bruiser, Engineer, their new Shangri-La Monkey, their 2 Sentries, their Pathfinder that always seems to die, and their Striker. To start the battle, Errooo has won the initiative with a 10 against 3. He is going to do a group activation with the Guide and with the Codebreaker. He'll start with having the Guide do a 5-inch move over here. Then Errooo is going to do a 5-inch move right up over here. And then the Codebreaker will do a 6-inch move right up on top of this, losing a little bit of movement for climbing. And then to do their second actions, this Sentry will just move 2.5 inches forward. And then Errooo will activate Fling. He needs a 7 but only rolled a 4. He'll go ahead and exert for 3 and take 1 strain damage to fling this Codebreaker over here. He is stunned, but he also has another action, which is kind of strange. And he's in contact with that Freeholder. So he makes a will roll with a target number of 10, but he also gets a +2 because of their faction standing with the Freeholders, and gets a total of 14, which means the Freeholder drops that loot and then is immediately moved 6 inches in whichever direction Errooo's team wants. So they're going to move him 6 inches over here. It says they ignore terrain modifiers, so he'll be right here, not in contact with Errooo. Then Errooo will do his 3-inch power move. He can climb up this and then drop down the other side. And then the Codebreaker, who should be over here by this loot, has 1 action remaining even though he's stunned. And he will pick that up, and he'll stay stunned and only have 1 action next round. Then Captain Smada is going to activate with the Striker, Pathfinder, and Guide. The Sentry Guide here will run over this way next to this tree. And then Smada is going to move 5 inches over here and then take a look at the Striker and attempt inspiring, but rolling a 1 just was not very inspiring. So then he will just power move over here next to the Guide. Then the Striker first and then the Pathfinder following will both double move 10.5 inches, kind of winding around here. Back there. Moving to the first mate phase, Sergeant Ruga over here will group activate with the Pathfinder and the Chiseler. The Chiseler will start out by doing a single move into contact here, and even though this Freeholder isn't holding any loot anymore, a will roll is still initiated, and so the Chiseler gets a total of +3 because of will and faction standing, but only rolled a 3 for a total of 6, which does not beat the 10 needed to move that Freeholder. So then Ruga is going to activate next, and he will move up here into contact, and he will try, and he ends up rolling an 18 with a total of +4, which will move him. They can move him 6 inches, which is just barely enough to get him off the table, and that will give them some bonuses after the game. And then their Pathfinder will do a 7-inch move over here, kind of behind the Chiseler. And then for second actions, he will just go ahead and move forward some more, right in front of this Guide. And then the Chiseler will also move that direction, kind of behind this rock. And then Sergeant Ruga will activate Coordinated Fire, targeting their Burner back here. He needs an 11 and got a 16, which is successful. And then he is going to power move 3 inches around here. And then over to Blinky's turn. He is going to activate with this Medic. He'll try to transport him. He needs a 13 but only rolls a 7. So that fails, and instead he'll power move and then move a total of 8 inches over here. And then the medic, who didn't get the free movement, is just going to do a double move. He can still, even climbing that, get into contact with this guy. And then he'll make a +3 will roll with a +3 faction bonus for a total of 21, which is more than enough to make this freeholder drop this loot right at his feet. Then the freeholder is going to run scared 6 inches this way. Neither of these teams really want to take down any of these freeholders. They want to get the bonus, faction bonus, after the battle for getting them off the board. Moving to the soldier phase, they'll have this striker, a double move. She has to kind of climb over this a little bit and then come over here, and she can get right about there. And then this burner and the trooper will both do double moves this way, with the trooper ending up behind that bush there and the burner ending up kind of behind Sergeant Ruga. And then over here, this bruiser and this sentry are both going to double move this way. The bruiser can get a little further, climbing over things, can get to right there, while this sentry is kind of stuck back here a ways. And then moving over here to Captain Smada's soldiers, this sniper is going to move 6 inches over here into contact with this freeholder, and on his will roll with a total of +6, he rolled a 20 for a total of 26, which will move him off the board 6 inches that way. And then the sniper will finish his movement coming 3 inches this way. And for the rest of their soldiers, this sentry is going to run 7.5 inches this way. This sentry here will go 7.5 inches over here. Their Shringrilla here, who's an expert climber, can run up over here and get to right here. Their engineer is going to double move over here and can get up this and just drop down right there on 9 inches. And then this bruiser can't do his full movement because there's a sniper in his way, but he'll come right up to there. In the creature phase, all of the freeholders will take a random movement one direction, and since they're all weighed down by the physical loot, he can only go 3 inches, which will go that way on his random direction. Then this one over here, he's on rough ground, so he can only go 1.5 inches, and he rolled to go this way. And at the end of the turn, each team can place one of their Venomous Croakers, starting with the active player, which is Errooo. He is going to place this right over here. Has to be at least 3 inches away from any models, and it has a 3-inch range to potentially grab anybody that comes by it. And then Smada's team is going to put one right over here to try to prevent Errooo from trying to come through here towards that central loot or over there at that freeholder. Moving to the next turn, Errooo won the initiative with a 7 against a 3, and he is going to activate with this bruiser, the striker, and then this guide is just barely in view and just barely within 3 inches. They'll start with having the guide activate. He'll kind of move over his teammates here, staying just beyond 3 inches from that Venomous Croaker. He'll fire his shotgun. He's a +2 against +3 for hasty shot, but only gets a total of 5 against 11, so that misses. And then the bruiser is going to just double move over here to get into combat with it. As soon as he moves within 3 inches, it'll make a shooting attack at him. And the plan was for this bruiser to come over and get into combat with the thing, but its shooting attack whip rolled a critical hit, dealing a total of 15 damage to the bruiser, and that takes him out before he can clog up that pathway. Then Errooo will activate. He'll use an Adrenaline Surge. He needs an 8 and rolls at 20. Then he'll power move over here. He gets an extra action because of that Adrenaline Surge. He's going to fire his flamethrower at this plant, trying to get some revenge. He's got a +6, but only rolls a total of 9. It's a hasty shot, and the plant gets a total of +4 in defense. But flamethrowers deal +2 damage, so that does deal 3 damage to the 8 armored plant, bringing it down to 7 health. And then Errooo is just going to use his final action to move over here. And then the Striker will activate. She'll move over here within 3 inches of this thing. That pauses her movement and it will shoot at her. But she has a +6 against shooting attacks, so she gets a total of 23 against just 8. And since that says it pauses the movement, I think she can finish her movement. She'll go ahead and move into combat with it. And then she'll go ahead and attack +5 against +2, but rolls just a 1, getting a total of 6 against 13. So she takes 3 points of damage and she is poisoned now. So just 1 action for the rest of the game. And then moving over to the other side of the board, Captain Smada here is going to activate with his Guide, his Sniper, and his Bruiser. They'll start with having the Guide kind of climb over his teammates to come over here. And from right there, he's going to take a wide open hasty shot. So he's a +2 against +3, but the result is a 13 for both of them, so that goes to the defender in a tie. Then the Sniper is going to try his luck. He'll move 6 inches over here with a +4 hasty shot. He gets a total of 16 against 6, so that deals 8 points of damage to the thing, putting it down to 2 health. And that does stun it, which is kind of strange to stun a plant. I'll go ahead and lay it down here. The rules do say that any figure stunned by a shooting attack ends up potentially rolling towards the middle, but it's got roots, so I'm saying that it ignores that, and the Venomous Croakers will just stay planted where they are. Then they'll have their Bruiser activate. He'll move this way and then pause his action when he gets close to the thing. It's a +0 attack now because it's wounded against +4, and the Bruiser easily defends with a 17 against an 8. He'll finish his move action, and once he gets within an inch, the thing will snap into combat with him. I guess I'll pull him to it rather than uproot the plant. And then the Bruiser will go ahead and attack. He's a +3 against +0, but he rolls only a 7 against 15. So the Bruiser ends up taking 4 points of damage and is poisoned. And then Smada is going to use Inspiring on this Shangri-La. Needing a 9, he gets a 14. So that gives the Shangri-La +1 fight for the rest of the game. Then he will power move and move over to this Freeholder that I guess fell over. And from right there, he'll make a will roll with a total of +8 because of his will and their faction standing. He gets a 15 for a total of 23, which is more than 10. So that will drop the loot there, and then this guy is going to run 6 inches off over this direction. And then over to Sergeant Ruga's turn. He is going to group activate with the Chiseler. The Chiseler will start out with its move, and it'll just move, not its full movement, just to right here. And then Ruga is going to use his movement up next to it. And from right there, he is going to fling it. He needed a 11 and rolled a 14. So that flings him right up here against this loot. He is stunned, but he still has his second action this turn. We'll go ahead and finish this power move over to here. And then the Chiseler with his +7 will try to break into that rock that's hiding the physical loot, but only rolls a 4 for a total of 11, so that stays locked. Over to Blinky's turn. He wants to try to transport this Guide over here by this loot. He needs a 13, but only rolls an 8. So instead, he's just going to power move and move, climbing over this rock. Now to the soldier phase over here. This sentry that's hiding out back here is going to climb over this, and he can't get very far with his heavy armor and having to do some climbing. But he can get right in here, and then this code breaker will stand up from his stun, and then he can move just 3 inches with this loot, which will get him to right there with his single action. Then their Pathfinder here is going to run up this way 7 inches and risk being out in the open to toss a grenade right down here. Altogether, he gets a +2 for a hasty throw that he can see the location of. But he got just a 10 total, so it misses by 2 inches and rolled to go this way. So it'll end up hitting Smada and this combat here. Against Smada, the +3 attack, it just rolled a 1 against a total of 18. So Smada defends that. And against the plant here, it rolled a critical defense, natural 20, so no damage there. And then a +3 attack against a +4 bruiser. Both ended up in the result of a 9, so no damage to anybody from that grenade. And to finish off their soldier phase, this trooper is going to double move down here, and their burner is going to double move straight down the middle here. And going to the soldiers of the negator, they'll start with having this sentry run 5 inches around here, and from right there he can take a wide open shot at this Pathfinder. However, he's more than 6 inches away, which in this scenario means he's got light cover, so that hasty shot gives him a +6 against +2, and the Pathfinder easily defends with a 17 against a 9. And then they're going to have this Shangri-La here. Just go ahead and double move around here, come over this way, climb on top of this loot, and get into combat with this Chiseler that will unstun him. And then we will go over here. This sentry here is going to climb up on top of this, and then work his way across some of this swampland. He can't move very far because that's rough ground. Then over here, this striker is going to move into the swamp and then have to move half speed through a bunch of this. And he can get to just about there on a double move, which isn't close enough to trigger a will roll. And then the Pathfinder is going to take the high ground, have to climb up here a little bit, with the idea of possibly flanking the enemy crew that way. And then they'll have their engineer kind of climb over their teammates over here and double move over here into contact with this physical loot. And then this medic is going to pick up this physical loot and run 3.5 inches this way, which will allow him to climb up on top of that rock outcropping. Going to the creature phase, even though this freeholder has dropped his loot and run, on the first 2 turns they just do random movements, and so he has rolled to move this way, 6 inches behind that tree, apparently wanting to recover some of his dropped goods. And then this one down here, who is run around on rough ground, rolled to move this way. It's just 1.5 inches through the swamp. And then to the Venomous Croakers. This one here will do a +2 attack against the striker and wins again with a total of 13 against just 11, dealing 3 more damage to that striker. And then over here, this wounded one will attack this bruiser, but gets just a total of 9 against 13 for the +3 bruiser. And then for new Venomous Croakers placed on the board, Errooo has placed one right here to prevent this striker from trying to change his mind and come over here to help out. And then Smada has put one right here to prevent this Codebreaker from trying to come out this way. Moving to the next turn, Captain Smada has won the initiative with a 6 against a 4. He'll activate with this Engineer and this Bruiser. He'll have the Bruiser attack +3 against +0. He wins with a total of 8 against 3, but doesn't deal any damage, so he'll just stay there in combat. And then this Engineer is going to pick up this loot with his first action and then move 3 inches over to there. And then Smada will use Inspiring on himself, needing a 9. He gets an 11, so he has +1 fight for the rest of the game. And he's going to just power move and move over here, back there, just so he's out of the direct action, but close enough to maybe do something here in the next couple turns. For Erroo's activation, he'll activate with this Trooper and the Guide. The Guide's going to start out by coming through here, and he can just barely get into contact with this Freeholder on a single move. And for his will roll, he gets a +3 total because of the faction standing, and gets a total of 13, which allows him to move this guy out of the way. He'll go 6 inches this way. And from there, he is going to fire his shotgun over here at the sniper. The sniper gets +2 for light cover because it's more than 6 inches. And the sniper gets a total of 15 against 8 and easily defends that. And then Errooo is going to move 5 inches over in front of this sentry. And from right there, he's going to fire his flamethrower down here, and he can actually hit all 3 of these figures. The special rule for light cover, if a figure is more than 6 inches away, I don't think applies here because only solid cover provides cover against flamethrowers. So that means this is a wide open hasty shot against this sniper. So that puts the sniper at +4 against +6, but Errooo got a total of 18 against 13. And that deals +2 damage and ignores armor. So that is going to deal 11 damage to him, which will wound and stun him. And then with the special rules for this scenario, stunned figures from shooting attacks end up moving 3 inches towards the middle of the board, or in this case, my basin down there, so he'll move over to there. And then for this guide, he does have light cover here, so he's got a total of +6 against +6, but Errooo wins with a total of 12 against 8. And that ends up dealing a total of 5 points of damage to him because of the extra damage and ignoring armor. So that will stun and wound him, or not wound him, but stun him, and then he will move 3 inches over there. And then against this engineer here, he rolled a critical defense with a +6, so he easily defends that. And then since Errooo has the Adrenaline Surge active, he's got an extra action this round. Unfortunately, those 2 moved out of range of his flamethrower, but he's just going to go ahead and fire it at just this engineer, +6 against +6. But this time it hits the target. He rolls a total of 19 with +2, and ignoring the armor deals 12 damage to him. And since engineers are the only specialist soldier released so far that only have 12 health, that takes him down, leaving that loot unclaimed. And then last for this phase, this trooper will run over here 5 inches out into the open, and he will fire his carbine down here at this sentry. It's a +3 shot, and the sentry has +6 for hasty shot and light cover for being over 6 inches away. But the trooper gets a total of 19 against 17, and that deals 8 points of damage to him, and that will stun him, which will move him 3 inches over here, making a big pile of injured soldiers over there. And then going to Blinky's turn over here, who's had all these bodies come rolling towards him. He's going to go ahead and activate with all of these stunned soldiers here. He'll start with having the sniper just stand up and then take a wide open shot at this Pathfinder. He's within 6 inches, so that is a +3 defense against just +2 shoot because the sniper is wounded. And although the sniper wins, he deals no damage with a 9 against a 7. And then Blinky is going to attempt to transport this guide. He needs a 13 but only rolled a 2. So instead he will just power move and move over this direction. And then he will have the guide stand up and do one action right over here, moving the engineer out of the way so that he can be next to this loot to maybe pick it up next turn. And then over here, this stunned sentry will stand up and run down here and can just barely get into combat with this Pathfinder on 5 inches. And then to Sergeant Ruga's activation, he'll activate with this burner. He is going to run over here and come into combat with this Shangri-La, and he is going to attempt to fling him. He rolls a 9, needing an 11, so he'll exert for 2, taking 3 damage with the strain. Then the monkey can try to resist. It's got a +3 fight and gets a total of 20, needing a 16 to resist that, so it will stay in combat. And then the burner is going to run up here into combat with this sentry and attack with support, +5 against +3, and he gets a total of 24 against 5, and even with his knife, he ends up dealing 12 points of damage. This guy only had 6 health remaining, so he goes down. Moving to the soldier phase, the crew of the Negator is going to start out with having this medic run off this way with this loot, 5 1/4 inches, and then down here, this Pathfinder is going to come around here, and then he can get into contact with this freeholder, And with his +6 total, he gets a total of 17, which makes him drop that loot. And then the freeholder is going to run 6 inches off this way. And then we'll go to this striker, who doesn't need to be in the swamp anymore. He's going to start running this way to try to help out his captain over here. He can only go 5 1/4 inches. And then the sentry will run over here, and he'll take a hasty shot over here at this Pathfinder. It's a +2 against +4, and the Pathfinder defends with an 11 against 5. And then to finish off their soldier phase, this Bruiser will attack this Venomous Croaker, +3 against +0. He gets a total of 20 against 4, and chops that thing right out of the ground. The Bruiser can't move because he's poisoned and only gets 1 action for each activation. I almost forgot about this Shangri-La here, but he's just going to do nothing, keep Ruga and this Chiseler tied up in combat. Moving to Errooo's soldiers, they'll have this Pathfinder just toss a grenade right down here. It's a +4, +5 because you can see the location. He gets it right where he wants it with a 19. So a +3 against the +1 wounded sniper there. Gets a total of 13 against 7. That deals 3 damage to the sniper, which is just enough to take him down. And then against the Bruiser, he's got a +4 against +3, and he defends with a 7 against a 7. And then the Pathfinder is going to come over here to get into combat with the Shangri-La to add support. This Chiseler, who will attack with a +5 against +3, and the Chiseler wins with a 13 against 11. He is carrying a knife though, so that deals just 2 damage to the Shangri-La. And then right over here, this Sentry is going to come into combat with this thing, and it'll attack. It's a +5 with support against +2, and the robot gets just a total of 10 against 8. It does deal 2 points of damage. And then the Striker is going to attack. She'll be a +7, and she gets a total of 20, which ends up doing way more damage than she needs to, and she slices that thing right down. But she is poisoned, so she has to just wait there. And lastly, for their soldiers, this Codebreaker doesn't want to get close to that Venomous Croaker around the corner, so he'll run this way about 4 inches to get up on top of that wall there. For the uncontrolled creatures, this Freeholder can run off this edge of the board down here, and the Freeholder down here can run off now that they will actually make move actions to escape rather than just running around randomly. And since there's no Venomous Croakers that are in combat, at the end of the turn we'll place some new ones. Samada placed one right here to prevent soldiers from coming this way towards this loot. And then Errooo placed one right here, so it can just barely reach into this area to prevent this Striker from trying to come through that way to help out what's going on here in the middle. Moving to the next turn, Errooo has won the initiative with a 10 against a 3, and he'll activate with the guide behind him. He'll use the Adrenaline Surge power. Needing an 8, he gets a 16, so he will get an extra action this turn and next. He is down to 9 health though with that strain, and then he will move over here with his power move and lay down a line of fire. This flamethrower here, it's a hasty shot, so against the Venomous Croaker it's a +6 against +3, and he wins with a total of 19 against 9 with 8 armor and 10 health. That is more than enough to take that thing down. And then against this Bruiser over here, the Bruiser is a total of +5 against the hasty shot, but he rolled only a 2 for a total of 7 against Errooo's total of 21 with +2 damage, ignoring armor. There again, that is a lot of damage. 14 damage when he only had 8 health left. And then Errooo is going to come over here with his single move, and he can just barely get into contact with Blinky to kind of tie him up. That might be dangerous with his low health. And then the Sentry over here can double move 7.5 inches, which is just barely enough to put him into combat with this guide here. So there's going to probably be an epic battle for this loot token. And moving on to Captain Smada's turn, he'll activate with this Sentry and the Striker. He'll start out with using Inspiring down here on his guide. Needing a 9, he gets a 16. So that guide has +1 fight. And then Smada is just going to kind of power move and then run off over here through the jungle. He can go a total of 4 inches on that. Then he'll have his sentry here, run over here, right into combat with the enemy guide on a double move. And then their striker on his double move can just barely get all the way there into combat as well. So they're trying to gang up on this enemy guide so they can finally get that loot out of there. And now to the first mate phase. Sergeant Ruga over here will activate with the Chiseler and with the Pathfinder. He'll have the Pathfinder start out by attacking that Shangri-La. He's got double support by the Chiseler and Ruga, so he's a +7 against +3, but the Shangri-La wins with a total of 21 against 11. And with their sharp teeth that deal +1 damage, that deals 12 points of damage to the Pathfinder, wounding him, leaving him with 2 health left. And then Ruga, instead of fighting, he's just going to try to fling the thing. He needs an 11 and rolls a 12, which is successful. And then the Shangri-La, to resist that, gets a fight roll against a target number of 16, but it's +3, give it only a total of 5. And then Ruga is just going to fling it 6 inches over here, so it ends up in the range of this Venomous Croaker, so as soon as it tries to move, it might get snagged by that. And then Ruga is going to power move and move over here. He can just barely get into combat with this sentry on a double move to make sure that he's not adding support in this battle here against the guide. And then the Chiseler is going to attempt to open this. He's got a +7 with his picks, and he rolls a 7 for a total of 14, which is just enough to unlock that. Breaks through that rock pile, grabs this loot, and then he will move 3 inches over here by this fallen bruiser. Something like that. And then moving to Blinky's turn up here, he is going to activate with the guide that's standing behind him. He'll have his guide attack with just single support now against the enemy guide. That puts him at a +6 with Inspiring against +3, and gets a total of 18 against 7. So that deals 7 damage to the enemy guide. Then he will push himself out of combat and then move over here to add support in this combat. And then Blinky is going to attack with support. Blinky is a +5 now against +3, and Blinky wins with a total of 15 against 5. Blinky is carrying just a knife though, so that deals just 3 points of damage, but does put Errooo down to 6 health. And then to the soldier phase, we're going to end up with a giant Brawl over here. This trooper will double move into combat with this guide, and then up here, this burner will double move into combat. He can get over here by this striker. Since this striker here is poisoned, she can only do a single move 7 inches to here. And then the sentry will follow behind 7.5 inches on a double move right next to her. And then this codebreaker over here with his loot can move 4.5 inches down here. Getting ready to move off the board. And speaking of loot, for Captain Smada's soldiers, this Pathfinder will use his first action to pick up this physical loot and then climb out of the swamp over to here. And then the medic over here will just move off the board, securing the actual first loot of the game. And then this Shangri-La here is he is stunned, but he's gonna try to run away from this thing. He's got a +3 against the +2 shooting attack, and he gets a total of 21 against 13, so he escapes from that, and he's gonna run over here to get into combat with this wounded Pathfinder for his single action. And since all the freeholders have left the table and none of the Venomous Croakers are in combat, we'll move to the next turn. And Errooo has once again won the initiative with a 12 against 8, and he'll go ahead and activate with this trooper. Errooo is going to try to fling this guide out of combat. He needs a 7 but only rolls a 2, and with just 6 health, he cannot exert to make that work. So he does have another action because of his adrenaline surge, but he's not going to risk the attack with such low health, so he'll just sit there. The trooper, however, will go ahead and attack. He's a +3 against the +4 inspired guide, and he ends up winning, getting a total of 16 against 7, and that deals 5 damage to him, which wounds him with 4 health left. He'll push him out of combat, and then the trooper is going to use his single action to climb up over here and get into combat back here with Blinky. And then to Captain Smada's turn, he is going to double move out of this swampy area and just kind of come around here on his double move. He's not quite ready to run off the board yet. He's wondering if he might be able to do something to help his team over here, but he's definitely going to keep a safe distance. And next to Sergeant Ruga's turn, he's going to activate with the burner and the guide and also this striker over here. So she will use her single action, being poisoned, to come over here and add support to Ruga. Then Ruga is going to attack this sentry, total of +7 with support against +3, and he gets a 20 to 6. He ends up dealing 9 points of damage, leaving him at 5. Then Ruga will push himself out of combat and then use his action to come over here to add support against this striker. And then the guide will attack. The burner doesn't add support because he's also in combat here. So he's a +5 against +5. He wins, but just gets a 10 to 7, so no damage. Then the burner is going to attack with support of Ruga, +5 against +5, and he ends up getting an 18 against 12. He's got a knife though, so he does just 7 points of damage, leaving the striker at 7. And then to Blinky's turn, he'll activate with this wounded guide. The guide will just come over here to get into combat with Errooo to prevent this trooper from adding support, and then Blinky is going to attack. He's only a +3 against +4, but he ends up winning with a total of 16 against 8, and with his knife that deals 4 damage, leaving Errooo at 2 health, but he's not wounded because of the Restructure body he used at the start of the game that prevents him from ever being wounded. Going to the soldier phase, Erroo's sentry robot will move 5 inches over here, getting into combat with this guide, and then he'll go ahead and attack. He's a +3 against +2 for the wounded inspired guide. The robot sentry gets a total of 21 against 18, and that ends up dealing 10 damage to the guide who only had 4 health remaining. And moving around the board, their codebreaker over here can run off the board with this physical loot. And then this chiseler over here is going to double move 4.5 inches. He'll actually come this way because he's got to get around these obstructions over here. And then lastly, they've got this wounded Pathfinder, and he is going to choose to just sit in combat to try to delay this Shringrilla. But then on Smada's soldier phase, the Shringrilla will attack. He's a +3 for being inspired against +1, and the Shringrilla wins with 13 against 5. And since Shringrillas have sharp teeth, which deal +1 damage, that deals 4 total damage, but I guess the Pathfinder only had 2 health remaining anyway, and he goes down. And then the Shringrilla is going to move 6 inches over here towards this Fling chiseler. It'll never be able to pick up loot, but if it can take down the chiseler, it can prevent them from fleeing with that. And then back here, this Pathfinder, who has fallen in all 4 of their previous battles, is going to double move this way. He can't quite get off the board, but he's just a few inches from surviving a battle without having to do a survival roll at the end. Then moving back up to this melee here, this striker is going to attack the guide. The burner doesn't add support because he's in combat with both these, but Ruga does, so it's a +5 against +5, but the striker wins with a 22 against 17, dealing +1 damage and reducing the armor by 2. That deals 14 damage to him. He only had, I believe, 7 health remaining. And then their sentry could attack the striker, but she's got a bunch of bonuses, so he'll attack the knife-wielding burner instead, even though the burner has support from the striker. So it's a +3 against +5 for the burner, and the burner wins with a total of 14 against 4, and the knife causes just 2 points of damage, leaving the sentry at 3 health and wounded. With nothing happening during the creature phase, we'll go to the next turn. Errooo has won the initiative again with a 13 against an 11. He's going to try to fling Blinky out of combat. He's getting low on health, so he doesn't want to die here. He succeeds with it with an 18. He does take 1 strain, putting him down to 1. But then Blinky, with his +3 to resist that, rolls a 13, getting a total of 16, which means he gets just enough to resist being flung. So instead, they're going to get violent here. This sentry is going to move into combat and attack with double support. So he's a +7 against +3, and gets a total of 26 against 9. That deals 15 points of damage to Blinky, but Blinky has not taken any damage from anything. He hasn't succeeded on any of his powers, so hasn't taken any strain. So he's down to 1 health and wounded. The trooper back here is going to take advantage of Blinky being caught off guard there. He'll attack with a +6, getting a total of 19 against Blinky's just 15, with his +1 for being wounded. And that is a total of 7 damage because he's carrying a knife, taking down Blinky. And then the trooper will use his second action to move into combat with just this striker here. With Smada's hopes of winning this melee getting slimmer and slimmer, he is just going to power move over here a little bit, where he can just barely see the striker down here, and attempt inspiring. He needed a 9 and got a 9, so that striker has a little more chance to deal some damage, and then he is just going to run off this side of the board. Then coming back here to this combat, Sergeant Ruga will activate with the burner and the striker. He'll start with having this striker with a +5 attack on this wounded sentry that's got just a +1. So she rolls a total of 20 against 2, and with +1 damage and ignoring armor, deals a total of 12 damage, taking down that sentry. She's poisoned, so she can't do anything else. And then Ruga is going to try to just fling this striker out of combat so they can pick up that physical loot. He succeeds with an 18, needing just an 11, but the resistance roll of the +6 striker was a total of 24, so he's staying put. So instead, they're going to have the burner attack with double support. It's a +7 against +6, but the striker wins with a total of 19 against 12. And with the +1 damage and ignoring armor, that deals 11 damage to the burner, wounding him. And the striker will go ahead and push the burner out of combat so he can't add any support. And then to the soldier phase, since Blinky is down, this chiseler, instead of trying to run this way, he's going to come around here. He's going to try to run over towards his allies, double moving 4.5 inches over here. And then to Smada's soldier phase, this Shangri-La is going to run over here, and actually he'll come around this way to get on this side of the chiseler, and he will attack. He's a +3 against +1, but the result is a tie, both getting 15. The Shangri-La deals +1 damage, and the chiseler deals -1 damage. So 6 damage on him leaves him at 6, and 4 damage on the Shangri-La leaves him also at 6 since he'd already taken some damage. And then back over here, the striker is now going to attack the trooper. He's a +6 against just 4 now for the trooper. And the striker wins big with a total of 25 against 17. That deals 14 points of damage, which takes down the full health trooper. Moving to the next round, the crew of the Negator won the initiative roll with an 8-4. But since Smada's off the table, Errooo will activate. He's going to just do a double move around here, 7.5 inches. And then we'll jump to Ruga's activation. And he is going to activate with the burner. This sentry is just within 3 inches, as is this striker. He will have the striker, with her single action, move 7 inches down here in combat. Then this wounded burner is going to run over here to add support. And then the sentry is going to move into combat. And with triple support, he'll attack with a +9 against +6, but the striker barely beats him with a total of 21 against 20. With the +1 damage and negating armor, that deals 13 points of damage to him, and he'll go ahead and push him out of combat, leaving the robot sentry with just 1 health. Then Ruga is going to go ahead and attack. With double support, Ruga is also a +9 against the +6. Ruga does win with just a total of 14 against 8, so that deals 4 damage, leaving the robot striker at 3 health. And then going to the soldier phase, the negator's soldiers get to attack first, so the striker is going to try to take down Errooo. He's got a +6 against +8 for the double supported Errooo, but Errooo ends up winning with a total of 27 against 17, and that deals 15 damage with his knife, taking down the striker. And then over here, this Shangri-La is going to go ahead and attack the Chiseler, +3 against +3, and once again they rolled a tie of 16 to 16 this time. That deals 7 damage to the 6 health Chiseler, taking him down, leaving that loot unheld. And then the Shangri-La takes just 5 points of damage, leaving him at 1 health and wounded. And then down here, this Pathfinder has finally made it off the board alive. On to the next turn. The crew of the Negator won the initiative again with a 16 against a 9. But Errooo's going to start things out. He's going to activate with this burner, the wounded burner, and send him just over here, 5 inches. And then Errooo will come over here into this pile of bodies and pick up this loot here. And then we'll go on to Ruga's turn. He can move and power move 9 right over here into contact with this Shangri-La, and then he'll attempt to fling him. Needing an 11, he gets a 13, but the Shangri-La's resistance roll, it gets just a +1 because it's wounded, but gets a total of 20, needing just a 16, so it will not be moved. Then the Shangri-La, going to the soldier phase next, will attack the striker. He's just a +1 against the +6 striker. They both end up rolling 2s, so even with the striker's +1 damage, it doesn't get past the 10 armor of the Shangri-La, but she will choose to push it out of combat, and since it's wounded, it doesn't get another action. And then to the soldiers of the Iron Golem, the striker will just go ahead and pick up that loot now that it's more than an inch away from that Shangri-La. And at this point, I'll just go ahead and call the game. The Shangri-La, having just 1 hit point left, is going to choose to just try to escape from the board rather than try to stop that striker from getting that loot. So they'll secure that loot and this other loot that Errooo has there, and the game is over. Well, this ended up being a very bloody game of Stargrave. Lots of soldiers fell. With these two, the guides, if they fall in combat, they don't do survival rolls. Instead, the crew just has to pay 60 credits for their injuries, so both crews will be doing that. Then we'll do some survival rolls, starting over here with the sniper. He is fine. The striker, he is fine. Their engineer, he is fine. Next we'll go to this sentry here. He's fine. Their other sentry, he is badly wounded. They'll use their advanced medical suite to re-roll that, and he ends up dead. And then for their bruiser, who doesn't really matter, he is fine. And then Blinky, an 11, so he's fine. Over here to Errooo's crew, we'll start with their bruiser. He is fine. Their chiseler, he is fine. Their trooper is fine. And then their pathfinder, also fine. So for all these soldiers going down, only having one of them die, that's pretty impressive. For faction bonuses, since neither crew killed any of the freeholders, they gain a +1 bonus with them, and they also gain a +1 bonus because they each moved a freeholder off the table. And now both of the crews have at least a standing of 3 with the Freeholders League, so both crews will get the plus 20% anytime they sell any trade goods. For after-game powers, we've got Investments on an 11, failed. Haggle on an 11, failed. And then down here we have Information Broker on a 14, failed. And Treasure Seeker on a 14, they failed all their after-game powers. For experience points, neither team had any of their commanders get to the center point of the board, and this +5 for killing a Venomous Croaker is standard for defeating uncontrolled creatures. And Errooo and Ruga maxed out their experience points for powers used and enemies they defeated. They unlocked the only loot that was on the board and got some other experience points there, giving them a total of 230 experience points. Combined with what they already had, they had Ruga gain 2 levels, and he made Armoury easier to use to see if they can finally get that to work. And then he learned the Wall of Force power to help with some battlefield control, and they have 55 experience points remaining. The Crime Gang really struggled with using powers in this game. Smada used Inspiring 4 times, but Blinky failed all of his in-game and out-of-game powers. There were no loot tokens they were able to unlock, and so they only gained 135 experience points. Combined with what they already had, they were able to have both their commanders pass 1 level, and they used that to increase their fight stat. After all that melee battling, they figured that was a good idea, and they're left over with 0 experience points remaining. Now to find out what's in the physical loot that Eroo's team found. This is an advanced weapon. That's a pistol of +1 damage. And this is an advanced technology table 2. And that's a grapple gun. And then for an alien artifact, they found a micro transporter. And they do have that standing of 6 with Molly, which allows them to re-roll either 1 advanced tech or 1 advanced weapon roll. So they'll choose to re-roll that pistol of +1 damage and instead have a rapid fire of +1 damage. They'll give that to Errooo to replace his standard rapid fire, and they'll give the grapple gun to their trooper, move his jet boots to the codebreaker, and move the force shield bracelet to the chiseler. They'll sell their micro transporter and old trade goods with the 20% bonus for their freeholder standing, then spend 800 credits to add a repair bot charging station, a ship upgrade new from the Last Prospector book, which allows them to add a repair bot as a 9th soldier, which leaves them with 120 credits. For the 2 physical loot that Smada secured, so this rolled as trade goods worth 200 and trade goods worth 250, but with their faction standing with the freeholders and their external cargo pods, this one gets boosted up an extra 80 credits, and this one up an extra 100 credits. So they got a bunch of money. And Smada will bring along a free runner to fill the spot of the Fallen Sentry to help pick up some loot. Then he'll hoard his 790 credits to save up for some more ship upgrades. The crew of the Iron Golem gained 3 investigation points, and so did the Negator's crew, though one of their points was from their standing with the Darksiders, which doesn't count for scenario selection. So Errooo is going to choose the Dragon's Den scenario to play next. And you can make sure you won't miss that battle by subscribing and hitting the notification bell. And in the meantime, feel free to check out some of the other content on my channel. I'm Alan with Bricks and Blocks Gaming. Thanks for watching and play well.